Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mind Blown Zone episode 18. This one is called Universal Law. It's going to be awesome. You excited, Brad?
I am always excited when it's time to record. How about yourself?
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, one of the best times getting this content out there.
Excellent.
Okay, here we go. So here's our little introduction. So there is immense confusion and misidentification regarding the concept law. Okay, we have been told that law is a set of rules that are created and are enforceable by social or governmental institutions to regulate behavior. That one's from Wikipedia. This is not what the concept law is referring to. Okay. Law is the set of all identifications, statements that always hold true. Okay. If you think of mathematical law, that's something you can say in mathematics. It is always true. We're going to explore this idea. So, what we'll be looking at are the substitutions that have arisen for law, including statutes. See, they call it statutory law. It's really statutes, it's policies. And we're going to look at common law. Okay. We'll also be discussing human nature. We'll be discussing rights. And we're going to establish all that so we get some kind of common ground, get the easy stuff. And then right on top of that, we're going to build out this universal law concept regarding life, statements about how life works that are always true. Okay. So, Brad, you want to just give a little taste of this universal law concept before we launch into the other stuff?
Sure. And you kind of hit on it there in the intro, but yeah, a law is anything about reality that always holds true. That's maybe the simplest way to say it, or even simpler. Laws are immutable. Like can't be altered or changed, like a statute or a rule or a policy can be changed. Therefore, it's not a law. It's a rule or policy. And you got the mathematical statement thing there. What was this Webster reference here? I'm not sure. You popped that in there.
Well,
Mathematica.
So we said a law is in mathematics they say a mathematical law. It's a statement in math that always holds true.
Right.
And you might think, oh, but math, this is a science of quantity. It's just a science of measurement, right? But if you go back further and look up what mathematics is not just the science of measurement. It's not just the science of quantity or anything. Mathematica is Latin and just to learn, right?
Is that from Greek? Is that what it says there? From Greek to learn?
Yeah, I think it says from Greek to learn. Mathematica from Greek to learn. All right. So you can take this mathematical statement. It's not just a mathematical statement, it's a statement. It's a knowledge statement that always holds true. Okay. That's what a law is. Any other definition that we've come across is a corruption. It's an obfuscation of the truth.
Right. We found dozens of words we've already covered in previous podcasts that have been, diluted like this one, but maybe none greater than this word law. So yeah, I think my closing, part of this section here was that this universal law is the only law because it's immutable. Can't be changed. No man can change it. It's the way things work, right. And it's the way things are, at least in this reality we find ourselves in.
Right. It doesn't matter whether a government or some ruling body says this, that, or the other. Nothing that they write down or impose changes the law.
That's the important thing is they can't change the universal laws, no matter what they do or say.
Right.
So they have to trick us by building out these lesser rules and policies and calling them laws. Kind of like a guy in his mid-50s who sells everything and buys a red Porsche. Little compensation, unconscious compensation going on there, perhaps.
Right. Okay. So this is really important to talk about because we did a podcast recently called The Power of Words, and we talked about how if you hold a definition in your head for a particular word and it and you think that that points to some particular thing, and you always believe that that's what that is, you're missing out on reality. You're missing out on a better, truer reality, and you're stuck focusing on this stuff that is like irrational and against you, right? So we just want to show that that's real, right? That we really have this going on. So we're going to go through some definitions here. If you go on Google and just type, what is law, right? Definition of law or something, it says law is a set of rules that are created and enforced by social or government institutions to regulate behavior. With its precise definition, a matter of long-standing debate, it has been variously described as a science and as the art of justice. Okay? Then we got Wikipedia. Law is a set of rules that are created and enforceable by social or governmental institutions to regulate behavior. I mean, imagine being told that the law isn't something that's inherently reasonable by, an objective look at reality. It's something that is created by specific groups of people. Whoa. Okay. And then, yeah, let's live under that and call it the law. And you might think if you even go back to a better dictionary or something that you'd find, a more objective and honest definition. But even if you go back to Webster's 1828, which I generally love, it says in general, this is definition number 26. It says in general, law is a rule or a rule of action prescribed for the government of rational beings or moral agents to which rule they are bound to yield obedience, in default of which they are exposed to punishment, or law is a settled mode or course of action or operation in irrational beings and in inanimate bodies, right?
Well, you
So
struggled
it's
through
still
that
there.
one.
Oh, that was pretty wordy, man. I gotta say, I wasn't ready for any of those words. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, so
Some of the
to say it's
1800s language is pretty hard.
Not a good definition that we're getting. So we've got to, it's been corrupted for over 200 years at least, right?
Right. So these definitions lead, like they are the foundation of statutes, right? With that running definition of law, that gives rise for a government to come along and create these statutes. So do you want to explain the statutes, Brad?
Sure. And I point out, first of all, that, statute and statutes are very similar. In fact, a lot of people will write statute or see statute when they're reading something. That's no accident there. A statue is a dead representation of something, right? Statue of Thomas Jefferson or Abraham Lincoln, right? So there's plenty there to see if you're willing to look, but basically the statutes are for dead entities, which is what we are treated as we've discussed in the legal overlay podcast in the past. But a statute is just a rule made up by men, simple as that, and written down or codified. That's all it is. And you could take the word policies and say they're the same thing. Statute and policy is the same thing. Now, policy we associate with a corporation or a business, but our government is also a business or a corporation. There's no difference between the two. And really, for example, McDonald's has a set of policies or rules that they have that they require for your employment there. You have to wear their uniform and a name tag and show up on time and clean the toilets or whatever your job is, right? Those are their rules. And if you want to work at McDonald's, you have to follow their rules. And when it comes to the statutes, the original conception of them, of course, was that the statutes were for the employees of the government. So there were the Congress and the judiciary were over top of the employees of the government. And so that it makes perfect sense that they would have policies for what was required of a government employee. Now, how that got flipped around and applied to their bosses, which is we the people, that's a whole nother matter that isn't easily explained. But yeah, and you can take that word statutes and all these other things that go along with it, like acts, codes, regulations, mandates, ordinances, decrees, etc., are all fall under the same umbrella as statutes. They're rules written down by men.
Right.
And that's the legal system.
Right.
It's wholly based on acts, codes, and statutes, so forth. And unfortunately, what all of us agreed to be were employees or dependents of this corporation known as government when we unwittingly agreed to be citizens. That's what trick was. So there are two different things going on in this world: legal and lawful. And obviously, we are presently being dominated by the legal system due to our ignorance of how things really work. Those two words are not synonymous, as many people think. They are two entirely separate things, and maybe even three entirely separate things when we look at our full podcast today. So there's universal law, and there's kind of common law, which is, more like the customs and traditions of a community. And then there's statutory law, which is, of course, government, tyranny, legal system.
Okay.
And what else do we got here? You like this liege part? You want to do the liege stuff?
Yeah. Just before I mention it, or you can't hear any background audio at the moment, right, bro?
No.
Okay, good. I think this microphone is so good at not hearing background noise, even though someone else outside is like, I might mow right now while Matt's doing that. Okay. So this legal and lawful, like, they're presented as synonyms. People just use them willy-nilly to mean the same thing. But if you dig deep enough, you'll find that the word liege and the word legal have a common etymological root. Okay, I've hounded ChatGPT-4 about this. I've been in a very big debate about it, and it has admitted on behalf of all academia and science that legal and liege have a common root. So legal means of or pertaining to the liege, right? So when you have a legal system, that means the system of the ruler, the system of the king, the government, right? Doesn't mean anything to do with law. It's just a system run by the liege, the one
Right.
to whom you owe allegiance.
That's right. You pledge allegiance to the flag, which is produced by the liege.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff.
So I'll mention this abomination thing. So basically, this legal system is, codified statutes and rule is an abomination. Okay, it's nothing that should have anything to do with us. And we see even First Amendment auditors are going around going, "What statute? There's no statute that says I can't." And gee, even they are fully immersed in this legal system and giving it power. So we do want to mention. Do you want to mention your basic rules thing? Stop on red, go on green, bread. I think that's more you.
Yeah, I just think this can be a big turnoff to people when they start thinking about certain rules and customs that you have in your community. So, for example, most of us live where there are cars and streets and so forth, and nobody's suggesting that there shouldn't be rules for driving. So we all think it's a good thing that everyone should stop on red and go on green. And if you don't follow those rules, then you get in accidents and kill people. So these are obviously, these aren't laws. These are rules that anybody in a community that agreed to live in the community it would make sense that they would all follow these and understand how this worked. So
right.
That's not, there are degrees of this that make sense and degrees that don't. But that, if you didn't want to live in a community like that, you could go somewhere where India doesn't have any traffic lights or stop signs, or you can ride your bike or your car or your horse cart on either side of the road. And, it's crazy and mayhem. So if you don't like green lights and red lights, you can go to India. So there's a way to get out of that, but it makes good sense that it keeps everybody safe and so on and so forth. But then there, of course, is the seatbelt laws, which came into effect probably right around the time you were born here in America, Matt. I remember a time when you didn't have to wear a seatbelt, and I certainly didn't when I was before I was a driver. But I thought it was a pretty good idea to wear a seatbelt when I finally got the chance to drive. But do I agree that the guy, my neighbor, if he doesn't want to wear a seatbelt, he's got to pay the liege $250 if he gets caught? I think that's a bad idea. He's a fully grown man. He can do what he wants. If he doesn't want to wear a seatbelt, shouldn't have to. So
Right.
we can see how most of the statutes have some rational common sense in them to start, but they always, they keep taking more and more freedoms and taking more and more advantage under the guise of, security or protection or whatever.
Right. Right.
And they don't have that right. So
Right.
that's that idea.
Right. And you got this here. We didn't set up. I mean, I'm not American, but still, I can still say this. We didn't set up a constitutional republic to hire people to make up policies to restrict our rights. So I say that on
Right,
behalf
which is
of
what has
Americans.
happened. Right, that's what's happened. Right, we're the boss. That's what the constitutional republic is. Right, and we created government, and then government created citizens, and then we agree to be citizens, and then they now can make rules to restrict our rights. That's how it all worked.
Right.
Simple as
so
that.
they made up a whole bunch of rules that say citizens can't do this, citizens can't do that. And then they say to you, "Are you a citizen?" And you go, "Yeah." And they're like, "Okay, so step in here, please. We have a whole bunch of rules and policies that apply to you." And you're like, "Oh, okay.
Right.
Here's my ID. Where do I pay the fine?"
Right. And here's the real trick: when you went to get your passport or your license, which you shouldn't have to get either. That's a whole different conversation. But they didn't even give you a choice. Like, are you a U.S. citizen? Are you an unregistered alien? Are you a green card holder? But none of them said, "Are you my boss?" Right? Because we would have checked that box that I'm none of those things. I'm your boss. Leave me alone. And didn't give us that choice. So it's technically a fraudulent contract that they handed us. Right? Black disclosure. But fighting and winning that inside their legal system is a near impossibility. Unless you know what you're doing.
Okay. Shall we go into common law?
Absolutely.
1 second. Well, common law is like statutes. It's still a substitution for law, but it's not written down. It's not codified, right? It's the basic agreement that people in a locality have agreed to live by, right? People, you can imagine common law, like kind of people get together and they're like, "Yeah, I think I'd make it a society here, a little village. Maybe we'll grow with time. So what do you reckon is a good rule? Like we'll just all agree to follow and live in this way, yeah. And I suppose if you don't do it, then maybe we'll kick you out or have some punishment. That's like agreed upon rules by the community. Would you say that's a good definition for common law, Brett?
Yeah, it's customs and traditions, right, of a group of people that agree to live together effectively. So that's what.
Yeah, they're not all established at the beginning. They arise. Some are established at the beginning, and some arise over time. Just like, yeah, okay, let's agree. Let's agree.
Probably most arise over time, right? They live together for a couple of months, and then this guy down this way plays his music too loud on Friday nights, and this guy over here spreads manure too thick, and you know what I mean. So there's little things arise over time. But yeah, it's everybody's usually given an opportunity to see, in order to live in this community, we want these ideas to be respected. You'll see a lot of these things in what they call HOAs. I don't know if you have those in Australia, homeowners associations. Do you have those kind of things where a little neighborhood gets together and says your trees have to be so many feet away from the sidewalk and your grass can't be taller than this, and you can't leave campers in your driveway, and they have all these rules, and people say, yeah, I think this is a pretty community, so I'll agree to this set of rules and customs in this
fair go
neighborhood. So that's those are all effectively what they are. They're not laws, they're rules. Or you go over to Saudi Arabia and women have to wear the hijab over their face, and that's the tradition or the rule. And if you don't want to wear a hijab, if you're a woman, then you have to go somewhere else. It's as simple as that.
Right.
So those are examples of common law.
Right. Yeah. Now I want to touch on this idea of nature and natural rights. I guess I'll go into this because this is mostly my stuff here. So this arises from like the Constitution, right? It's the Constitution. It's got the Bill of Rights. It's got certain rights in it. And that seems to have something to do with law, right? And I first thought that law is the same as rights, right? So I thought that if um something is right, then that's the law, right? If it's right to be able to protect yourself, if it's right to be able to speak in public or share information, press, then that is the law. And I thought, okay, that's natural law, right? So some concepts here that have come up are natural, right? So natural means over pertaining to the nature of a thing, right? So human nature is that which pertains to the nature of humans or men or women, right? Rights. So rights are here's a definition. Here's my best definition of rights: freedoms that man must have in a society in order to live. Another definition of rights: that which is right for man in a society, right? But this is still not law, okay? Like the rights that are presented and what is right and what we're kind of agreeing upon in the United States Constitution is kind of like it's still a common law, right? Based on reason of what is right. And then it's kind of like expanded to a whole country, right? So common law in Western society, especially USA, is generally based upon man's nature and that which is reason to be good for man's life. Okay. So I wanted to just get this in here. This isn't like, because I wanted to distinguish it from what Brad's about to talk about, right? So this natural law is basically a list of rights, which is a list of things that are right for men and women in society, right? But it's not really law because, as we defined from the beginning, law is immutable. Law is the totality of the set of statements that are always true, right? Always true and unbreakable. Now, it might be right to not steal, but people can steal, right? Do you see that? It's like it might be right to have free speech, but people can deny you free speech and take it away. So there's not really a law. There's not really a universal law going on here. So natural law is not law either, right? Natural law is really just called the list of rights, okay? And that's my distinction.
Gotcha.
How do you like that, Brad?
Well, yeah, and there's some crossover and some gray area. So take your free speech example. It's true that someone can take away your free speech, but the universal law is that you can say whatever you want. Right? It's obvious that
right
you can you might get in trouble or get killed for it, but you could still say whatever you want.
Sure.
So, and it's just like the freedom to move about or travel, right? It's you can clearly see that there's nothing in nature or the universe that's preventing you from moving from point A to point B, right? You may have to, get on a boat or, climb a mountain or whatever to get from one place to the other, but there's nothing stopping you, right, in nature from doing these types of things. But man's rules can obviously prevent you from doing these things. Doesn't take away from the fact that it's still a universal law.
Right. It's kind of as if the law is that it is right for men to be able to move and speak and protect themselves, right? But it's clearly not a law. You can't say men can protect themselves or men can speak freely. That's not a law. It's right for them to do it. That's the law.
Yeah, so it can get a little tricky there, and a lot of people want to tie.
It gets tricky at the boundary here. Yeah,
tie these morality to these things, right? And it's certainly worth looking at that. We didn't write it down here, but this idea that comes from the Bible, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? That really is the singular law of what we're looking at would be man interacting with other men and women, right? That's the societal interaction law.
Right.
That covers morality. Like, well, don't go punching people in the nose unless you want to get punched in the nose. And you go, well, I don't want to get punched in the nose, so I'm not going to go around and punch other people in the nose. Right? These things are easy to see. So do no harm, injury, cause no harm, injury, or loss to your fellow man. Right? That's the same kind of idea. So those all fit into that. So if you want me to jump, we'll get into some of these universal laws.
Yeah, sure. If I could just mention one thing before, it's like, we covered all this stuff at the beginning. Like, what we're really here to talk about is these universal law. We just wanted to put everything else, like, objectify everything else and put it aside to actually create a fresh space for what we're about to talk about. Right. So now that we've done that, boom, let's do it, Brad.
Bang. Universal law. So this is what's most interesting. If everything else is lost on the listener, what's most interesting about these is that we aren't taught these. Nobody has told us about these universal laws in modern times, right? Our modern education skips right past this, and there's literally no coverage of this for hundreds and hundreds of years. And another way you could call these universal laws, you could call them God's law. You could also call it the way of things. It's been described in other traditions. So that's really interesting when these kind of things are applied to this idea of universal law. And perhaps even more importantly is the notion that there is a penalty for breaking these laws, or there is a consequence for not understanding these laws. And I am not going to spend a great deal of time with all of these examples here today. Each of these examples could be one or more podcasts in and of themselves to get into great detail about these, but we'll cover, I think I picked roughly 10 or so, or a dozen that I thought were interesting, and we'll just spend, just a few moments on each one, just to give everybody a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about universal law. So one that a lot of people may have heard before, and there's a tremendous amount of confusion on this, but there's also a lot of discussion. And you could say this law of attraction idea started to gain some momentum probably around, I think it was 2005 or 6, when this book came out, and later, a documentary called The Secret. Have you ever seen that, Matt, or read the book, The Secret?
I never watched it, but I've watched a lot of material from Abraham
Okay,
Hicks.
so you're familiar with that. So that's when this really, really got started, almost 20 years ago. And that the whole opening scene is, this is ancient knowledge, and the old philosophers and alchemists and mystics of the old period knew about this. And the basic idea of the law of attraction is that you get what you're thinking about. So the results of your life are based on what you think and feel you are should be involved in. So when it comes to your health, your wealth, your relationship, your career, your position in life, all of these are a result of what they call the law of attraction. It has nothing to do with being attracted to somebody or not. That's not, it means you attract to yourself the situations and circumstances that you are in effect vibrating at. So this is this more notion that we are energetic beings at our core, and our vibratory level. And this goes a little bit back to our consciousness talk, is that your level of consciousness is in effect, really your level of vibration. So you're attracting to yourself good things or bad things. That's a subjective idea. But if you're poor, you want to be rich. If you're unhealthy, you want to be healthy. And the suggestion in these law of attraction type material is that you can change your circumstances if you can change the way you think and feel about your circumstances. And there are 50 different iterations of this easily that you can go into, and there's a lot of detail, and it takes a lot of time to really cover this subject well. Suffice it to say, when most people hear about this idea, they think, all right, well, I want to be a billionaire, and they sit and think, all right, I'm a billionaire, and they think about it for a day or an hour or a week, and then at the end of that period, they go, yeah, I'm not a billionaire. This is stupid. It doesn't work. And that most people will leave this behind with that because they don't understand how it all works. And more importantly, they don't know how to make it work. That's how it's swept aside. But it is probably the most powerful universal law. That there's 3 or 4 others in here, but that's definitely the one that has garnered the most public attention, certainly in the last 20 odd years. Any other thoughts on that, Matt?
And so what is the punishment for breaking the law of attraction? Or trying to break it or something? Can it be broken?
I think that the punishment
break it.
is what you can't break it. The punishment is that you get if you don't know about it, you don't understand that if you sit around and you're worried all day, if you're fearful about this, if you continually are, tearing yourself down, self-judgment by saying, I'm no good, I can't do this, I'm right. That once you get going on that thought stream and then those associated emotions, and all of a sudden you're in this deep hole of misery and suffering, all because you don't understand the law of attraction because no one ever told you about it. So that's the penalty, right? I think I said at the outset here, the penalty here is that because you're unaware of them, you're suffering the consequences of lack of awareness, and you're more focused on wearing your mask and getting your vaccination and doing the right thing at the TSA line and all these other things that aren't really pertinent at all to your success and happiness in life. So that's the essence of the penalty idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, we've already brought up an interesting thing here is that, we've established that they're laws, so they cannot be broken. So it's not so much a penalty for breaking them as a penalty for not consciously or not living in alignment with them.
In accordance with them, right?
In accordance with them, right? I don't know what you're doing if you're not doing that, but you're not. It's as if you're not using it to properly. You're just somehow not aligned with it. Not that you're breaking it. What would you say about that?
Yeah, it's a lack of awareness, right?
Lack of awareness,
and it's not because you aren't aware. It's because these things aren't popularized. These things aren't talked about. I mean, the law of attraction should be taught to first graders, kindergartners.
Right.
And as soon as there's some reasoning faculty in the mind, you should start teaching this to them. And you would probably get kids that were very, very well behaved and that were successful and happy very early on if they understood that going over in the corner and whining for 3 hours because you can't have an ice cream cone, that's going to make you miserable, right? And the kid's miserable, and then he learns, and see, that's what you attracted to yourself. Then you got stung by a bee, and whatever. You start attracting negative experience. But if nobody understands this because they're not told about it, then that's the penalty,
right?
Because you can't change it. This is the way things work,
right? The penalty is for just your lack of awareness. And just by having awareness of this law, well, you'll get more of what you want, right?
That's right. You'll get exactly what you
suffer
want.
less. Like the penalty is suffering, yeah?
Pretty much. Suffering, misery.
Awareness is the solution. Suffering is the penalty.
Well, yeah, right. Now, obviously, you have to apply these rules, and that can be difficult. It's not easy. After 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years of indoctrination, right, we get set in our ways. And so take some effort, take some practice to get yourself to get in the flow of these. And like I said, we could do a 5-hour podcast on the law of attraction, and that would barely cover it. As you mentioned, you listened to some Abraham Hicks, and Esther's been out there on the circuit for 30 or 40 years, giving 5-6 hour seminars for 40 years. So obviously all the questions aren't yet answered about the law of attraction. But it kind of leads into the next law, which is the law of assumption. And it's really a corollary of the law of attraction. But it is that what you assume to be true becomes what your life looks like. In its essence, at its essence. Right. So you can say, I can sit around thinking and feeling I'm a billionaire all day long, but I assume I'm not. I only have $1,000 in my bank account. And if I walk around all day in that assumption, then that becomes what I attract. But it's just an assumption. That's the hard part. Say, well, no, I only had $1,000 yesterday, and I only had $1,000 the day before, and the week before, and the month before, and the year before. So it's an accurate assumption I'm having because that's all I've ever had in my bank account. You follow?
Yeah, I'll give a really funny example. You know, my friend and I were discussing this video game, and I was telling him, yeah, what level have I beat that on? And I was like certain. I was like, yeah, I've beat it on level 32. That's like this really high level. I was like, I beat it on level 32. And I was just certain that I had. And then later I realized that I hadn't. I was like, I haven't beat it on level 32. Huh. But then I just started playing it, and then I had beat it on level 32.
There you
So
go. That's
just that energy I put into the assumption resulted
a
in
great,
it being true.
it's a great example. Great example. That reminds me actually of a tennis tournament that I was in, and this kid was allegedly the number 3 seed. I'd never played in this big of a tournament before, but then when I looked on the draw sheet for my own thing, he wasn't seeded at all, and so when I saw he was a 3 seed, I thought I was going to lose, and then when I saw he wasn't seeded, I thought I'd win, and I beat the kid in 3 tough sets. And afterwards, I said, well, that guy was pretty doggone good. And it turns out that he was the 3rd seed. So I would have lost to him if I would have known he was the 3rd seed.
Right.
I'll never forget that. I probably played the best tennis match of my life at that age. I think I was 15, and I was just making shots that no one could believe. I actually had a crowd watching this little punk 15-year-old playing tennis. It was something to remember. But yeah, that's a good example you gave as well. But yeah, that's kind of how it works. There's a lot more to get into, but that's, it effectively works hand in hand with the law of attraction. And perhaps the most important point to make about the law of assumption is that most people, when they hear about this, they go, all right, well, I want a Ferrari, so I'm gonna attract a Ferrari to myself. And they spend a month doing their vision boards, or thinking about and feeling what it's like, and going down to the Ferrari dealership and doing a test drive, and they do all the things that they suggest they're supposed to do. But at the end of the month, or whenever they decide to give up, they'll tell you, I knew it wasn't going to work the whole time. So they just told you what their assumption is what they attracted. Right? It was like more important for them to be right about their assumption that it wouldn't work than the actual law working. So there's the law of assumption for you. It's a tricky one. What we got next here? Compensation. I think I told you a little bit about this one the other day. But yeah, this one's pretty fascinating. And again, you can go through a bunch of really good examples in a longer podcast if people want to do this. But the law of compensation, learned this through Rosicrucian work, is that, and you'll get this out of the Bible too, is that you get back more than you give, and it has to be given selflessly. Is the real ticket. So if you're helping people in some way selflessly, I think the Bible says you'll be compensated 7 times. Is it 7 times 7, 50, 49 times? The way I learned it was you'll be compensated 10 times for what you give. And again, the hard part about this is doing things selflessly. So if you decide, well, okay, I want lots of good stuff to come my way, so I'm going to go out and help old ladies cross the street and carry their groceries and go down to the soup kitchen. All in the back of your mind, all you're thinking about is all the good stuff that's going to come your way because you were doing these good works. You're not going to get any of it. None of it. The law of compensation is completely sidetracked because you were thinking, I'm only doing this because I want more stuff to come my way. Make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's a powerful. I mean, imagine the world we lived in if everybody understood this rule. Nobody would ever be lacking or needing anything.
Well, I would say that the question that comes to my mind is like, how do you know whether you're doing it selflessly or not?
It comes
What
from the
you're
heart.
calling selfless when it comes from the
Comes from
heart.
the heart. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can't be coming from your head. Your head saying, "Oh, I want this 7x7 return." Hey, that's. I guess I'll go down to the soup kitchen. I'd rather be laying on my couch playing video games, but I want this 49x return compensation. So I'm going to go down to the soup kitchen. So you just crushed it right then and there. It's not going to do you any good. It's the pay it forward kind of idea. Yeah.
Right.
You don't want anything in
Yeah.
return. You're doing somebody a favor. You're helping somebody out, and you're not doing it because you think you're going to get something for it. So
It was funny that
powerful
they did
rule.
that movie, Pay It Forward,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of showed you how everything could suddenly become great. But people were like, nah.
Right. No one believes it because they didn't get taught this, and their teachers and their professors and the media, and no one tells them about it. So it's just a made up thing that kid got lucky. Right. That's what they chalk it up to. But it's a real rule and it does work. I've seen it many, many times in my life, and I hope to see it many more times. But yeah,
So
the whole world would work differently.
if you authentically had, don't worry about paying me back, just pay it forward. If you were totally feeling like that, you would be in line with the compensation law.
Absolutely.
Right.
You'd expect nothing in return, zero expectation. Like I said, the whole world would change overnight if everybody understood the rule.
Right.
Overnight, everything would change. Right? The homeless people, the hungry people, the weak people, the destitute, the mentally, everybody would be helping everybody else. And pretty soon, the results would be magnified to a level that can't even be conceived of what society would look like. Just understand this one rule. It's not a rule. It's a universal law. And that's the way it works. So that's a nice touch on that one. We got to keep this moving here. So law of forgiveness, I call this the most powerful technology in the world. And it is a technology. And, obviously Christians are very familiar with this idea of forgiving. And we've all heard forgive and forget as a, kind of a pithy statement when something doesn't go our way, it's time to move on and so forth. But, how many people genuinely forgive, especially people that really, really hurt you, right? And it's certainly not an easy thing to do. But if you understood the bigger picture, which often requires a higher level of consciousness, if the spiritual outlook were accurate, which I firmly believe it is, then you would soon see that you would want to line up the people you need to forgive and take care of it. And it's something you can do, by the way, just in your imagination. You don't have to do it physically with people. It can be done in the imagination. We talk a little bit about that in the Take Your Power Back course, one of the modules. And we're not going to get into the details here, but it is an extremely powerful technology. And it's fair to say that a great deal of human misery is the lack of forgiveness and the grudges, the anger that people hold towards others that they feel hurt them. It's an enormous burden to carry.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions?
I'm interested in this next one, retaliation. Seems really interesting. I haven't heard this one before.
It's the opposite of the law of forgiveness, of course.
Mm-hmm.
In effect, it probably should have been combined with karma there a little bit, but retaliation is if you retaliate against the wrongdoer against you, then you're basically double cracking the whip. So it's going to come back around to you worse than prior to.
Oh, that seems rough.
It's very rough.
I'm disappointed.
And sadly, most people, this is their natural it's the normal reaction that humans have kind of been trained into. Right. Is to retaliate against your transgressor. Right? This is the Jesus, turn the other cheek, right? If if your oppressor smacks you in the right cheek, turn and give them your left cheek idea.
Right.
It doesn't seem like that's the right thing to do. And by no means is anybody suggesting you go out there and just let people push you around and kick you around. But there are certain people in your life that you should reconsider retaliating against. Shall we say, people closer to you in your life normally. And this is a law where the penalty is great indeed.
I think the challenge is in this law, at least for me, is like you can try to abide it like so hard for so long. But the energy that's like pushing your retaliation, my retaliation just kind of builds and builds and builds, and eventually
Right.
a retaliation has happened.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got to follow it. You have no choice, right? If you suppress that for too much, you basically go insane.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Like eventually your head just explodes and you snap.
yeah, right. You've got to act on it. So absolutely. But the point is, and we talked a little bit about this, not in any podcast, but you and I have talked about this idea of karmic discharge, and we'll get down to karma here in a second. In fact, I think I'll jump right to it after this. But we're running long here. But is this recognition that the way out of your dilemmas is to react differently to the things in life that trigger you in the best way that you can, right? You can't go from who you are behaving right now to behaving like Buddha or Jesus or Krishna, right? When no one's suggesting you can make that leap, but you do what you can, right? How can I respond in a different way to this situation, right? You think about it, work on it, you see if maybe something else will work, and you give it a try, and it works or it doesn't work, and then you go back to the drawing board. But that's the idea: is to respond with an energy that neutralizes the aggressive, angry, fighting, retaliatory energy coming at you. Someone's got to, in other words, in that particular interaction, someone's got to neutralize the energy.
Right.
If nobody does,
seems like, sure. It seems like, at the beginning you're like not sure what that like there is some energy that neutralizes it, but when you start off, you don't know what it is, and you got to try this and try this energy, or try that energy. Didn't work. Got worse. So you're suggesting that eventually you get closer and find the right energy, yeah?
Well, yeah, you can always tie that energy into some degree of understanding, compassion, forgiveness, loving kindness, something. It's always something, gratitude. It's always something along those lines. That is the energy that neutralizes the attack, aggression energy.
Right. Or maybe the challenge is to stick with it, right? To keep, or to be able to give enough of it.
Yeah. But the first challenge is to see it in the moment, right? Which you probably won't be able to do when you realize this. You'll go through your same fight with your significant other or your parent or your child or your boss or whatever, right? You'll have your same go at it, and then you'll think about it after it happened, and there was an opportunity for me. And next time around, maybe you'll react differently. A sign of a higher consciousness is they're not reactive. Right? The higher the consciousness gets, the more what's the opposite of reactive? They're more observant of a situation. So they're not reacting. Right? You see a big fight between two, lovers, for example, right? It's just boom, 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 right? You can't even breathe between jabs and screams and so forth, right? It's like ping pong. And a higher degree of consciousness would, the girl would say something to you, and rather than you coming back with your immediate whatever you were going to say, you stop and think about it. So even that pause is neutralizing the energy in some ways. You're not reacting in the same way that you were beforehand. Anyway, we're killing this in time. I was going to spend 30 seconds on each one of these. So I'm just going to dive right into karma here. I think that's where we need to go with this one here today. But this idea of karma is a huge idea. I think a lot of people misunderstand it. And a lot of people think it's not real because it doesn't show up in this holy text or this particular thing, but it's very real. It's all it is the law of cause and effect, and it's actually stated very clearly, even in the Bible, right? It says, what as you sow, so shall you reap. That's the law of karma, and it's just what goes around comes around. It's why Jesus says, "Judge not thy brother, lest you judge thyself." It's why you should love your neighbor with all your heart, mind, and soul, all that kind of thing. This is all because of this law of karma, that what you send out, you're going to get back.
Right.
So everybody you
Even
hate, everybody you judge. Go ahead.
Even scientifically, you have, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's like you cannot put energy out from you into the universe without it returning. Like it's just how it works.
That is how it works. And this is a massive, massive law to understand. And if this is another one, like compensation and attraction, if everybody understood forgiveness, this is the way the universe works, whether you like it or not, then they would rethink what they thought, what they said, and what they did in this world. But we're not educated on these universal laws. So people go out and break, ignore, and shatter them to pieces, and unfortunately suffer the consequences.
Do you want to do 30-second goes on redemption, non-resistance, and receiving?
I don't. Let's keep chugging here. So there's a lot more. Like I said, I could do 50 of them, and maybe we'll do that in time. But that is a good taste of some of the bigger ones that are out there.
Okay. Well, you seem to be on top of the pace that you want to go at. So why don't you go into this, what to make of all of this, and then we'll just conclude.
Yeah. So all the previous stuff, I'm not sure what we were saying there. Is
up for statutes, debate. Common law, rights.
What did we mean by up for debate? Changing from place to place.
Well, statute, it's like, well, we make a new statute. Common law, it's like, well, what do we agree on? Like, what rights? What are they? What rights do we have? It's all that stuff is kind of like wishy-washy and up for debate, and like different here, different there, right? But universal law is immutable and constant.
Right. It's been here since time immemorial. It'll always be here. It's the way things work, as I said above. We missed that question above there. That's a good question, though, that I wanted to ask the listeners. Like, if you've never heard of all or most of these laws, these universal laws that we discussed tonight, ask yourself, why not? Why haven't you heard about them? I guess one answer could be, well, because they're not true and real. But that would be kind of a cop-out type of answer. It's like, well, have you put them to the test? Right? You don't certainly don't want you to believe us, but if you try to put these into work in your life and see if they're true or not, that would probably be a rational answer. But I obviously, the way our podcasts are going is we're suggesting that there's certain forces in this world that don't want us to understand these things in order to keep us from taking our power back, in short.
Right. They want you to believe that the statutes are law. They want you to believe that law is what governments say. Because when you believe that, then you'll go, oh, that's the law. Then I'm going to live according to statutes. And when you live according to statutes, you give your power to the people who own the legal system.
Statutes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What a
novel idea.
Tell me, no, statutes are law. I'm like, oh my God, please. I'm glad to give this podcast out now to anyone who says otherwise.
Right. Well, like what they say, repeat a lie often enough and it becomes the temporarily apparent truth. I think is the right way to make that statement. Certainly, if you surveyed 100 random people on the street, they'd all agree, maybe 1 out of 10,000 would have a sense of what we're talking about today, probably. I don't know, maybe 1 out of 1,000. I don't know. But definitely the vast majority would agree that statutes are laws, unfortunately. So what do we say here? Yeah, universal laws are not enforced by man or authority. It's absolutely life-changing to live by the universal laws. There's no question about it. It takes time to learn them, to incorporate them, to integrate them into the life, but it will change your life in huge ways. And that goes to, happiness, success, health, finances, everything that matters, relationships to people will be duly and positively affected if you incorporate these. Yeah, so that's a good line there. Just your brief awareness, even after listening to this podcast, is enough to begin a positive transformation. We said enough in those 20 odd minutes we talked about those, that I think people at least got a feel for what these universal laws are. So that's enough to get started. Certainly hunt around in various places and find more information on these. And obviously this, you could say that living in harmony with the universal laws causes your life to be harmonious, across all facets. It just, everything smooths out when you understand these universal laws and live by them, abide by them.
Mm-hmm.
So that is maybe enough of a push. I think what I've been talking to Matt about, doing a course on these laws, putting together some modules, going into a little bit more detail, maybe covering a couple dozen of these. And, it can have immense effects on people's lives. They just understood them and did their best to live by them going forward. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, right. So
think we'll do that course?
depending on when the listener is listening, if it's 2024 or beyond, I would take a look at the courses page and see if this exists, or even if it's late 2023. Let's see.
Yeah, maybe in a few months from we're here in summertime 2023 doing this, but yeah, we're hoping to get something out like this. And some of these laws are built into the take your power back course. They're not, some of them, they're not explicitly defined as universal laws, but the precepts and the basis of some of these are built into that course.
Right.
So it's an option for anybody who's interested in doing something immediately. We have that one available.
And you can see that at the bottom of the page you're on.
How about that? Cool.
Very
so that
good
was all I
video
had.
that we highly recommend watching.
Yeah. Anything else you want to toss in here tonight, Matt?
No. Love it.
Sweet. All right. Well, we once again appreciate everybody. I'm going to say this for the first time ever. We would, depending on where you're watching or listening, we would like to ask people to give us a like and a subscribe or a follow, depending on what platform you're on.
Mm-hmm.
We could use your support, and we'd appreciate it. And if you're even feeling inclined to set up, if your platform you're on offers notifications, please click that bell. We try to put out a podcast once a week, and you'll be the first to be notified when it comes out if you sign up for notifications.
Mm-hmm. And especially if you're if you watch this on the mindblownzone.com, we have our own private subscription thing there. I mean, when I say private, I mean it's not on a social media platform. Just subscribe by email, and we can keep in touch that way.
Perfect. All right. I think that's a wrap.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate everybody tuning in and listening. And hopefully you got a little bit out of this. It's a powerful podcast from our point of view, and we'll do a lot more on this in the future. And we will see everybody next week. Thanks everybody for listening, and thanks for joining, Matt.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everybody. Hope you love this one.
We'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right. Bye, everyone.